Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Izuku Has Foresight? Okugurai wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. Izuku stands outside the Todoroki compound and looks at the notification on his phone. Something like regret settles into his stomach, along with frustration and anger. An annoyance at his quirk. The notification is that his contract with the Todoroki family is ending. His quirk is telling him to let it expire. He wants to stay working there. He likes working with plants. And he likes the Todoroki family. They're nice and they seem to like him too. Well, not Endeavor. But Izuku has never actually talked to the guy. Izuku smiles tightly at his phone and sighs. Well, he knows that his quirk is right and that whatever his quirk is planning, it's bigger than he can guess it yet. He slips his phone into his pocket and pulls on his gloves. He sighs a final time and walks into the Todoroki compound. The grounds are quiet as they always are. Izuku walks until he finds the gardening shed. Inside is Konishi Kazuo, the man with the mustache and two heads. He's organizing some bags of fertilizer. Izuku knocks on the open door of the shed. Konishi looks up at him. "Oh, Akatani," he says, straightening up. "Good timing as always. It's good to see you. Have you thought about my offer?" Yeah, I did," Izuku says, rubbing his neck. "It's really kind of you, but I don't think I can accept it. I really have enjoyed working here. But I've got other things moving forward and don't think I can continue here." Konishi looks disappointed. "Really? This is quite the position," he says, "and you've been a huge help here. I really don't know what it is, but you've really got a touch with the grounds. I don't think it's ever looked so good. We really could use you here. You've really been the best gardener we've ever had." "Ah, that's really kind of you," Izuku says, glancing away. "But it's not really in the cards for me. I really do appreciate everything that you've done for me over the years." "Of course, kid," Konishi says with a sigh. "I won't try and pressure you. I wish you the best of luck. I'm sure you'll be great in whatever you choose. You can grab your things whenever you like." "Thank you," Izuku says, smiling. "I would like to work one more day though. It would be nice to at least go through the motions one more time." "Course you can." Konishi shakes Izuku's hand. "I've got to head out, but I'm sure you know what needs to be done. Best of luck, kid." "Thank you," Izuku says. He waves as Konishi leaves. There's still a sort of sad feeling rolling around in his gut, but he pushes it down. He grabs his gloves and whatever gear his quirk tells him to, then heads out. It's all standard. Trimming bushes and weeding the flowers lining the house. He's been there maybe 20 minutes when he sees Shoto walking up to him. He doesn't speak, just sits down next to Izuku. He's in his school uniform. "Heya," Izuku says. He's trimming rose bushes. There's something I wanted to tell you." Shoto looks up at Izuku. His face is mostly blank, but he does look a bit tired. Izuku looks away from him, staring fixedly at the rose bushes. "My contract here is ending," Izuku starts. "I can extend it," Shoto says instantly. Izuku can see him sit up out of the corner of his eye. "I know. Konishi already offered to do that," Izuku says awkwardly. He sets down the trimmer and sits down on his heels. "But I've got, well, other things are coming up. And this seemed like a good time to..." Izuku shrugs. "Oh," Shoto says. He's not looking at Izuku. I really did like working here. I've liked hanging out with you. And your sister and brother, and I like meeting your mom too. Your dad I don't like so much, but that's not too much of an issue." Izuku sees Shoto's mouth twitching at the corner. "I'm glad that I worked here anyway. I haven't seen your sister today, but could you tell her I said goodbye?" Yeah, I'll do that." Shoto doesn't seem to know what to say. "Yeah." Izuku shrugs and looks down at his hands. "But who knows, maybe we'll see each other sometime." "Yeah, maybe," Shoto echoes. He doesn't sound convinced. "Hey, it's not that unlikely," Izuku says, feeling a slight smile on his face. "Things like that happen all the time, right?" Shoto smiles. "If you say so." He lays down on the grass, arms pillowed under his head. Izuku goes back to trimming the roses. After a few minutes, Shoto starts talking, which is unusual for him. Normally he wasn't the one to start conversations. But he just talks, about his hero training school, his classmates and teachers. Shoto's a little awkward, like he's not used to talking so much. But he can be funny sometimes in a quiet, dry way. Izuku laughs a few times at the way that he describes his class's hero training exercises, and is interested to learn that one of Shoto's teachers is actually All Might himself. During Shoto's stories, Izuku picks up his tools and gestures for Shoto to follow him, and they loiter around a couple trees in the corner of the property as Endeavor walks past. Izuku waves at him, but the hero doesn't see him. Eventually there's nothing left to do, and Izuku returns to the shed. Shoto tells Izuku about his recent visits to his mother and the time he's been spending with his siblings. Izuku starts packing up his things. He's accumulated a bit. A few pairs of gardening gloves and extra water bottle. Odds and ends that had been easier to store at the Todoroki compound rather than carry with him. He packs them into his bag and walks to the back gate of the compound. Well, Izuku says, still a little bit sad, it's been a good one, yeah? Yeah. Shoto smiles, then just a small one. It's been a good one. Before I go I just wanted to say, and I don't want to overstep, but... Yeah. Shoto interrupts him. Well, I'm just glad that you've reconnected with your family, I guess, Izuku says. They're good people. And I guess I don't know the whole story, but I'm glad that you've got them. Shoto's smile grows a bit. Yeah, I'm glad too, he says. It was good knowing you. Yeah. It's not so final though. Izuku smiles. I'm sure that I'll see you sometime. Yeah, Shoto says, sometime. Izuku walks out the gate with one final wave. Izuku's crime phone buzzes again. He checks the notification. Unknown number. The prospective job will happen in 2 days. Meet at 7 a.m. An address follows. Izuku stares down at his phone. So this is really happening then. He's going to work for real, actual villains. And he needs to be somewhere at 7 in the morning. What? He sighs. His quirk has a number of things which it wants him to do. He replies an affirmative to the text number. He grabs his bag, a large chunk of cash from what's left of his crime money, and his jacket. He heads out the door. He goes out and buys a very heavy hammer, a thick black bag, a pair of walkie-talkies, and a golden mask that covers his whole face. Then he impulsively picks up a box of red hair dye and bleach. It's time for a change anyway. The morning of the attack, his quirk wakes him up at 5 in the morning. He groans and pulls his pillow over his head. But his hands tug him up and out of bed, and he finally relents and pulls himself up. He packs 2 bags. One of them contains his school uniform and books. The other is the bag he's just bought, the heavy hammer, his crime phone, and the flip phone he'd bought years ago when he created his false identity. He gets ready by pulling his hair, which he has dyed a dark red, into a messy knot at the back of his head. He then pulls on a black cloth mask and puts in red contacts. His hand hovers over the golden mask he'd bought, but his quirk pushes his hand away. He looks odd but not particularly notable. Not when compared with most people with mutation quirks anyway. At 6 in the morning he brings his school bag and uniform and hides it in a bush near his school. Then he starts toward the address which the unknown number had sent him. It's a shady-looking warehouse in the middle of an industrial district. He slips through a side door 2 minutes before 7 and is greeted with what seems to be hundreds of low-level villains. They have mostly mutation quirks and tend toward dark clothing. There's some amount of posturing and arguing, and Izuku pulls himself toward the edge of the crowd where he can lean against a pillar and try to look inconspicuous. Then he waits 20 minutes, during which the villains grumble amongst themselves. Then an inky blackness appears in the center. The villains who were arguing scatter and a number of them pull out weapons. Then the ink settles into the shape of a man wearing a suit. At his side is a slouching man who seems to be covered in hands. So these are the NPCs, the hand man says, glancing around him like he doesn't care much at all about them. The inky man seems to wait for him to say more, then steps forward himself when the hand man says nothing. I am Kurojiri and this is Shigaraki Tamura, he says. We've acquired your services today to serve as troops for an attack. We will be launching an offensive on the UA students. They are leaving the school to visit a training facility known as the USJ, where they will be vulnerable. There's a strange stirring among the villains. Some perk up with interest and take steps forward. Your job will be dealing with the students and the teacher of the 1A class. You will not attack one another and you use any force necessary against the heroes. Is that understood? No one responds, but every eye in the warehouse is on the smoke man. Don't be so glum, said Shigaraki, his face set in a wide, flaky smile. We're going to do something great today. We're going to kill All Might. There's a wave of movement across the room. The attack will commence in 30 minutes. Prepare yourselves. Then the two of them melt back into the void. Izuku shrinks back into the shadows as the villains break out into excited whispers. He feels his quirk pull him towards his crime phone. Izuku opens it and is drawn toward the Twitter app. He follows the movement of his quirk and types in a post. Foresight 2020, 7:34 a.m. At Hawks.Hero there is about to be an attack on the UA-1A class. Probably within the next hour or so. Good luck. Izuku posts it. Wait. So is this the whole point of getting hawks at a friend on Twitter? Probably. Within a few minutes he starts getting messages from random people asking what he meant. None from hawks yet though. He puts the phone on silent. He wastes a few more minutes doing nothing. Then more than 20 minutes later gets the impulse to take out his flip phone. He slowly types in a number, guided carefully to each digit. Then he dials. A few rings in, someone answers. "Hawks here," says a slightly bleary voice. "Who is this?" "Oh, it is? Well, you should probably check your Twitter. It seems kind of important." "What? Oh, why do you even have this number?" Izuku hangs up. Just moments after that the smoke appears in the center of the room again. "We will be deploying in 1 minute," the voice of the smoke says. His voice seems to emanate from the entire cloud. Izuku surges forward with the rest of the crowd, narrowly avoiding a few elbows to the stomach. Then the world drops out from underneath Izuku and he lands on unfamiliar dirt. He looks around. He's in some huge domed building. Izuku guesses this is the USJ. He's in some sort of plaza, surrounded by a huge crowd of villains. In front of them is a long set of stairs, on top of which is standing a group which he doesn't know. They're dressed in bright colors and all look rather short. Those are the hero students. Izuku isn't close enough to see them clearly. A figure leaps forward from the group of students, propelling himself down the stairs with some kind of prehensile white cloth thing which just a second ago had simply appeared to be a scarf. He's wearing all black casual clothes and has on a pair of strange yellow goggles. Izuku hears whispers of the name Eraserhead from the villains. Apparently this hero is known in the world of criminals. Then the fighting starts. The villains around him surge forward against Eraserhead. Izuku runs the other way. By the time he's reached the edge of some thick vegetation, the hero has already taken out a dozen of the villains. Izuku keeps running. He passes through what seems to be an abandoned town, around a scenic pond, and then into a frozen wasteland. It looks like it's meant to be a street in some small town, but everything has been covered with an uneven layer of ice. He's going to keep running when he sees movement to his right. He whips his head around and sees a familiar head of white and red hair. Todoroki Shoto. This must be that hero school that he's going to then. Funny that Shoto had never said he was going to UA. Or he had and Izuku had just forgotten. Either was possible. He raises his hand toward Izuku, then pauses, his eyes widen and his hand lowers slightly. Izuku waves at him, they're at least 20 meters apart. "Oh, Shoto. I told you we'd run into each other," Izuku shouts. Then remembers that he's being a villain right now. "Though I do need to leave now, nice to see you." Then he starts running away again. His quirk warns him just a split second before a giant iceberg bursts through the space he'd been moments before. He has enough time to duck into a building, then scramble through it and out a small back door. He sprints through a brief empty space and into another forest. His chest hurts from running and he thinks that maybe he's a bit out of shape. As he's running through the forest he hears the sound of cracking from behind him. He glances around and sees the entire house has been covered in ice. Scary quirk. Izuku changes direction and finally reaches the side of the USJ. There's a small door in the wall. It's subtle and painted to blend in. He pulls the hammer from his bag and smashes at the handle until the door finally opens. He rushes out and into a maze of corridors. Izuku guesses this is the maintenance entrance to get into the USJ. He catches sight of an exit sign and runs towards it. He finally gets out of the building and wastes a minute hunched over with his hands on his knees. He feels sick. He hasn't ran that long or fast in a long time. Then his quirk starts insistently pulling at his hands. "Yeah, I know," he grunts and pulls out a flip phone from his pocket. Once again he goes through the process of slowly typing out a phone number digit by digit. It rings once, then someone picks up. "Hello. This is Principal Nedzu, who is this?" The voice is strange and high-pitched but the dictation is perfect. Well, Izuku flounders for a moment, then realizes. "Principal of UA? Yes. Who is this? You know your students that are, like, on a field trip or something?" Izuku manages he's still a bit out of breath. "Well, there's a bunch of villains attacking them. I thought you should probably know." There's a short silence. "Hurry maybe? There are a lot of villains. There's only 2 teachers and they've separated the students. The heroes have been notified." That was quick. "Who are you?" Izuku's quirk doesn't tell him to hang up yet and he flounders. "I'm, Foresight." "Yeah. Why do you have this information?" Izuku's quirk finally lets go of the pull and Izuku instantly snaps the flip phone shut. He does not like phone calls. He pulls the back out of the phone and takes out the battery. He packs the pieces into his bag. Then he glances around and starts walking away from the building. He's maybe a block away when he hears something and looks behind him. There's a streak of gold that can be no one other than All Might, and just behind him there's a streak of red that he's pretty sure is pro-hero Hawks. Izuku's shoulders loosen. Everything should be okay then. He heads to school. He finds the uniform he's packed away and changes in a public bathroom. He packs the bag of his villain stuff in a bush that his quirk indicates. Finally, he makes his way into the school. He walks in just as the receptionist at the front door is loudly copying some documents and files into his classroom, delicately avoiding the security cameras without conscious thought. He gets back to school only 2 periods late, but just the right comment convinces his teacher that he's been in school all day. He's officially marked as present and his alibi becomes flawless. Okay, that was pretty stressful, but it was fun. Izuku is trying to do homework when his quirk tugs at his gut. He spends a moment staring at his math, which is due tomorrow first period, then decides that he absolutely does not care about it. He grabs both the papers and his textbook and shoves them into a drawer. His quirk tells him to put on the golden mask he'd bought. He pulls a hoodie over his hair. When he looks in the mirror, he can't see any of his face. He grabs the heavy black bag he's grabbed and puts in his crime phone and the walkie-talkies that he'd bought before the attack. He pulls on a pair of heavy gloves. Then he climbs out through his apartment window and up the ladder to the roof. It's quiet up there, and Izuku snaps a few pictures with his crime phone. Izuku then jumps across a few rooftops until he reaches a building covered in large scraps of fabric on wooden frames. He sits near the edge of the building for a few minutes, until Izuku sees a dark shape jumping across buildings on the other side of the street. His quirk pushes him upright and he grabs one of the walkie-talkies from the bag. "Yo!" Izuku shouts across the large gap between the buildings. The figure freezes and turns toward him. Izuku waves. The figure stares at him. "I've got something for you," Izuku shouts. Not in a bad way. Like, literally I am about to throw you something. He pauses and adds, not in a threatening way. Izuku winds up and launches the walkie-talkie as far as he can get it. It doesn't go especially well. The walkie-talkie would have hit the side of the other building and landed on the street if the figure hadn't caught it with a long pale tendril of fabric. Izuku realizes that this is the hero that protected the students during the attack. Eraserhead. The hero lifts the walkie-talkie up and stares at it for a few moments, then takes it in his hand and holds it in front of him. Izuku grabs his own walkie-talkie and presses the button. It makes a loud sound. Then the figure moves a bit and the walkie-talkie makes another loud sound back at him. Izuku walks away from the edge of the building to sit near the center of the rooftop. The scraps of fabric move erratically in the wind, blocking the line of sight between himself and the hero. He presses down on the transmit button. He settles into a more comfortable position and pulls the mask up until it's out of the way of his face. "Yo, Eraserhead, right? Good to see that you're alright. How'd things go at the USJ?" Izuku starts. "Who is this?" Eraserhead asks. "Oh, did no one introduce me?" Izuku asks, crossing his legs. "I sent Hawks that message about that attack the other day." "That was you," Eraserhead responds. "Yep," Izuku says with a pop. "Who are you?" "Foresight. Well anyway, I just wanted to catch up with you and make sure that everything went all right." "Why do you want to know?" "Well, you know, I did warn you guys, thought I should know how things went. Seems fair, right?" Eraserhead ignores him. "Were you also the other caller?" "Oh yeah, I called the principal after I got out of the facility." "Why?" Izuku thinks about that for a while. "I guess it was better to have multiple people aware of it so heroes would mobilize faster." "I see. Why did you warn us at all?" "Listen, Eraser, can I call you Eraser?" "No." "Okay, listen, Mr. Head. You keep asking me questions but haven't answered any of mine." Izuku can practically hear the icy stare through the walkie-talkie. "Okay, so, what happened at the USJ?" Eraserhead pauses for a few moments. Only a few minutes after the fight had begun, All Might and Hawks broke into the USJ. They saved the students, along with myself and Pro Hero 13 from serious harm. When the villains found that their plan had failed so quickly, they retreated using the warp quirk. "Did they say anything?" "What do you mean?" "About what they wanted. Because if they didn't, then I've got some information you might appreciate." "What are your terms?" Izuku pauses. "What does he want?" "He'll probably tell the hero everything anyway. Is there anything that they could give him that he would want?" "Oh." Izuku honestly can't think of anything. If he wanted something he could get it. There isn't really anything that the combined force of the police and the pro heroes could give him. That's for the both of us to figure out." There's a moment of silence, then Izuku thinks of something. "Oh yeah, by the way, I would prefer if you didn't try to catch me, it'll be inconvenient." And anyway, it won't work if you do try. I never get caught. Izuku pauses. His quirk seems sated, twirling contentedly around his knuckles. Yeah, I think that's it. You don't want anything, Eraserhead says flatly. Izuku thinks that might be the only way he says things. Yep, go ahead with your questions now. Why did you warn the heroes? Well, I don't want those villains to kill anyone, duh. Who would just sit there and let them attack the students? So you were working for them and had a change of heart? No, course not. I just had some information and thought that I should share it with you. So you just show up out of nowhere and want to help us? Hey, I didn't just show up out of nowhere. I've done other things. There's a long silence. Izuku senses judgment there. I did a whole heist thing. I stole a bunch of stuff from a museum one time. You stole things from a museum. And that should make us trust you? It wasn't important stuff. It was like early quirk-era collectibles. No one got hurt. Izuku decides that he's dug himself deep enough a hole and should probably put down the shovel. Anyway, that doesn't matter now. I know you've got questions about why the villains attacked you. I've got information. Izuku pauses. You're recording this, right? There's a short pause. Yes. Okay, good. So their leaders Shigaraki Tamura and the smoke guy is Kurogiri. Their goal, or at least the goal that Shigaraki said, is that they want to kill All Might. That's all that I know so far. So far. Yeah, I figure I'll learn more over time. You're still in contact with them? Nope, not yet. We'll see how things go though. You are not giving as much information as you think. No, I'm aware. Izuku's quirk pulls him to stand up. I'm going to head out now, I think. How should I contact you? Eraserhead asks. You probably won't, Izuku says. I'll give you a heads up when we need to talk next though. There's only silence on the other end. Izuku leaves the walkie-talkie on the ground where he'd been sitting. He covers his face with the golden mask again. Izuku is suddenly pulled by his quirk to the other side of the building. There's some plant, long dead, in a pot near the edge of the building. His quirk pushes him toward it, and he ends up with 2 large handfuls of wet soil. It had rained recently and it's mostly mud. Why is my life like this? He mutters to no one. He's pushed toward the lip of the building and he winds up crouched under the railing. He sits there for 20 seconds before his quirk sends a warning. Then Eraserhead launches himself directly over where Izuku is sitting. Izuku stands up behind him and coughs. Eraserhead jerks around toward him, and Izuku sees the start of red shining through his goggles. Izuku throws the soil directly into his face. Eraserhead rears back, tearing away the goggles and falling into a defensive position. His face is completely covered in wet earth. Izuku doesn't even pause for a moment, and is immediately scrambling the other direction. He starts laughing without thinking about it. He probably sounds more than a little hysterical. Who leaves vents in their goggles? Doesn't that defeat the entire purpose? Also, the idea of a real pro-hero thinking that Izuku is a threat is hilarious. Izuku jumps the gap between the buildings. On the other side of that he finds a fire escape going downwards and climbs down. Eventually he gets to the ground, winded but unharmed. Then he turns and goes deeper into the alleyway. He slips into a crevice between 2 dumpsters. It smells bad but he doesn't move. A minute later Eraserhead jumps down from the same building. He doesn't even use the fire escape, he just uses those bandage things to slow down his fall. He lands in a fluid motion. Eraserhead briefly looks around, then runs into the street, still looking for Izuku. Izuku spends a few minutes sitting still and waiting for his breathing to slow down. Then eventually stands back up and climbs up the fire escape. Just moments after he's gone, a police car slowly drives past the alleyway entrance. Izuku makes his way back to his apartment, sitting still and hiding just before the police, Eraserhead, or some other hero would have seen him. Eventually he gets back to his apartment and slips back in through the window. First things first, he takes a shower to get rid of any smell of dumpster or sweat that might remain. Then he gets himself a bag of chips because he's hungry. He sits on his bed and pulls out the flip phone from his desk. He opens it, replaces the battery, then once again carefully dials a number digit by digit with the help of his quirk. We haven't found him yet, Eraserhead answers instantly. I'm checking the 3rd quadrant now. Well, I could have told you that, Izuku says casually, mouth full of chips. Foresight, Eraserhead says. The one and only, Izuku answers, leaning against the wall. I was being polite before with the whole walkie-talkie thing. And yes, even if you change numbers I can call you. We'll find you. Nope, no you won't. It literally doesn't matter what you do. I already told you this. That's a bold claim. It's really not, Izuku says, getting tired of the whole thing. It's just how it works. It doesn't matter what you do, what you try. In the end, this is true. I don't get caught. Check the information I gave you, it's a better use of your time. Izuku snaps the phone closed. Izuku's at school when he hears some other students talking about the UA Sports Festival. They're clustered around a phone, laughing and pointing at something. Izuku pulls out his own phone and looks up the event. Apparently it's happening right now. He should probably check that out sometime. His quirk pulls at him and he tucks his phone away. Hey guys. Izuku leans over to the other students and points to the door. They scatter away from the phone and go to their seats. An instant later the teacher walks in. Izuku has gained a reputation as the guy that saves people from getting in trouble. It was a little tiresome honestly. The rest of the students liked him, but he didn't talk to them much. He just wasn't really interested in the same things that they found interesting. He turns to pay attention to the teacher. The rest of the day passes, and Izuku walks back to his apartment. When he's back, he lays on the bed and pulls up the sports festival recording. It's not super interesting to him. Some of the ways the students solve problems are cool, but that's about it. Then he sees Shoto and perks up. He looks cold and disinterested. He blows away most of the competition. It kind of makes Izuku cringe how. Well, Izuku wouldn't want to describe his friend badly, but he does look cold, almost cruel. Without the quiet moments of indecision and kindness that Izuku knows Shoto is capable of, it's hard to see him as anything more than a terrifying and ruthless competitor. Eventually the tournament bit comes up, and Izuku watches the fights. Which is when he notices that Shoto is only using half of his quirk. He knows that Shoto can use both fire and ice. He'd helped Izuku light a bonfire for some yard debris once. What? Izuku watches through the whole tournament. Shoto wins the first few fights relatively easily, but the final round starts poorly. At that point Izuku gets distracted by the guy he's fighting against. He's got an explosion quirk and looks familiar. Izuku looks up his name and realizes that he actually knew that guy. He was one of those annoying kids who bothered him in elementary school. Kekken. Okugo. Izuku's pretty sure their moms had been friends for a while. Man, he'd been a violent kid. Weird that he's going to be a hero. Maybe he'd changed over the years or something. Izuku hadn't talked to the guy for a long time now. Izuku plays the video, and realizes that Bakugo is definitely still just as violent. He winces at some of the explosions that he sends at Shoto. But Shoto never uses his fire throughout the fight and he ends up losing. Yikes. Izuku watches the awards ceremony out of a sort of morbid curiosity. Bakugo looks incredibly angry, which is weird since he just won the tournament. Izuku closes the video, then stares at the ceiling for a while. He kinda wants to talk to Shoto. He hadn't for a while. Not since he'd stopped working as a gardener. Though he had run into him at the USJ actually. The conversation might be awkward, but he did want to ask about the whole ice and fire thing. He pulls out his crime phone and goes to the messages app. His quirk seems to hesitate. Then it pushes at his fingers. He types in a phone number, then opens a chat with it. Sparky. Yo. Hey dude. Nice show today. Good job getting second. Shoto. Who is this? Sparky. Oh yeah, I worked as a gardener for you for a while and I saw you at the USJ last week, sorry for it being awkward lol. There's a few minutes of nothing and Izuku wonders if Shoto is going to respond. Shoto. Are you a villain? Sparky. No. I'm not. I just needed to be there. It was like a whole thing. I actually sent the heroes a message that you guys were being attacked, laughing face. Shoto. That seems beyond the realm of just being a whole thing. Sparky. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, I sent the message on Twitter if you want to check it out. My username is Foresight 2020. It just ended up being the best way to make things work out well. I'm glad that no one got seriously hurt. There's a few minutes of silence. Izuku thinks that Shoto might be going through his Twitter to see if he was telling the truth. Izuku doesn't mind Shoto's checking. It's better than if he just trusted Izuku at his word. Shoto. You warned Hawks a few hours before the attack? Sparky. Yep. Shoto. Thanks. Sparky. MP. Well yeah. My name is actually Izuku by the way. I thought that maybe you should know that. Shoto. Nice to meet you Izuku. Sparky. Speaking of that guy you fought at that last tournament battle, Bakugo, I went to middle school with him. Shoto. Sparky. Yeah. Small world, right? He was kind of a lot back then too. I didn't know he was planning on being a hero. I think he talked about it as a kid, but lots of kids talk about how they're going to be heroes. Shoto. That is interesting. Sparky. Yeah, laughing face. So anyway, I was watching your match today and you were great. I did have a question. No pressure though. Shoto. What question? Sparky. Why aren't you using your fire side? Shoto doesn't answer immediately. The silence lasts long enough for Izuku to make himself dinner. He's sitting down to eat when Shoto finally responds to him. Shoto. It's Endeavor's fire. I'm not going to use something that's his. Sparky. Sorry. I don't mean to disrespect your beliefs or anything, but that's kind of dumb. Izuku waits a minute but Shoto doesn't respond, so he continues. Sparky. Like, what if there was a civilian in danger and if you didn't use your quirk it would lead to them getting hurt or dying? Your refusal to use your quirk would put them in danger. Plus it's not your dad's quirk, it's yours. Like it just is. But if you treat it like it's your dad's quirk, then you're making it into his quirk by treating it as such. There's no response. Izuku finishes his dinner and cleans up. When he's going to bed a few hours later, there's still no answer. He frowns at his screen then shrugs. This is more up to Shoto, not Izuku. He can make his own decisions. Izuku goes to sleep. Todoroki Shoto's life has been turned upside down. For years it had been the same thing. His life had been school, training, and sleep. He'd wake up, go to school, go home, train until he could barely stand, do his homework until he was completely mentally exhausted, then go to sleep. Rinse, repeat. Then his gardener had changed that. He didn't know anything about the guy. Just that he worked odd times, could talk about anything for hours, and had a truly inspiring ability to avoid Shoto's father. It was almost magic. If Shoto just followed him around it was like Endeavor just didn't exist. Dozens of times, his gardener had moved seemingly for no reason only for Shoto's father to appear where they'd been moments before. Shoto has some theory that the gardener had a hearing quirk or something similar but had never actually asked. That was something Shoto had found comforting about the gardener. He rarely asked Shoto questions. Not about his quirk or scar or even his pro-hero father. He just talked about flowers and acted like anything that happened was completely normal. When he did have something to say that he knew Shoto wouldn't like, he was always careful how he said it, and what he said was often right. And that was before his gardener had led Shoto to reconnect with his mother. Shoto still couldn't figure out if it had been intentional or not. But somehow, everything had just lined up around that day that he'd found himself seeing his mother for the first time in years. He decided that it really didn't matter why his gardener had done what he did. Shoto had been sad when he'd quit. Much more than he'd expected. Part of it was admittedly that following the gardener had let him avoid his father. But Shoto had actually enjoyed the company. Fuyumi had also been sad. Especially since she hadn't gotten to say goodbye. She hadn't said much, but Shoto could tell that she was disappointed by the whole thing. Then things got weirder. On what was supposed to be a routine trip for him and his classmates, they'd been attacked by villains. They'd been separated across the huge facility and Shoto had fought real villains for the first time in his life. Then he'd seen his gardener. He'd just taken care of the last of the villains who'd been attacking him, when he'd heard something behind him. He'd been about to send an ice spike at them when he'd seen the gardener's face. Shoto had thought it was just a trick of his stressed mind, but that was before the gardener called Shoto by name and waved at him. It had taken Shoto far too long to realize that he had been dressed just like the villains and there really was no innocent reason why he would be there. But by the time Shoto reacted, the gardener was gone. When Shoto had examined the building he'd disappeared into, he'd found nothing but an open back door. He tried searching through the woods around the area and found nothing that could answer his questions. But only a few minutes afterward, the pro-heroes had finally arrived. Shoto probably should have said something but no one had asked Shoto, "Hey, did you recognize any of the villains?" So he hadn't said anything at all. He did wonder at the timing of seeing the gardener only just before the heroes arrived. He didn't know what to make of that either. Then came the day of the sports festival. It had gone all right. He hadn't won but he'd come close. But that night, when he was holding his right hand to his bruises to cool them down with his quirk and scrolling through his phone, he'd gotten a text. It had been from an unknown number. He'd almost ignored it since it was probably just someone who'd watched the festival and found his number somehow. But he'd responded anyway. He'd felt something between horror and happiness when he'd learned that it was the gardener. But he wasn't surprised. Something about the gardener seemed to attract weird things happening. Shoto had learned to just accept that sort of thing as it came at this point. Shoto probably shouldn't have believed anything that he said. But Shoto had liked him when he'd worked at the house. And he still liked him. Plus he owed him for helping him reconnect to his family. So he listened to him. Shoto didn't really understand what was going on with him, but he was pretty sure that, all things considered, he was on the side of the heroes. And he told Shoto that his name was Izuku. Shoto was pretty sure that Izuku wasn't the name that he'd given Shoto when they'd met. So later Shoto had checked the family's records and found that he was right. He wasn't sure if he felt betrayed that Izuku had lied to him, or grateful that he told him the truth when he had no reason to. It had also given Shoto a way to check if Izuku was telling the truth. He'd asked Bakugo if he'd gone to school with someone named Izuku. At first he'd got nothing but insults and taunts. But eventually Bakugo did say that there was a kid named that at his elementary and middle school. Bakugo described him as weird and quiet and that he constantly would change his hair color. Shoto had taken that as confirmation that Izuku had given him his real name. Then Izuku had to ask about Shoto using his fire side. He'd been angry at first, but eventually that had faded. Now it was more a quiet consideration. He really did have a point. And Shoto had found himself lying awake at night, thinking about what he would do if someone died because he wouldn't use his fire side. He'd relented, a little bit bitter about the whole thing. Somehow, his gardener had ended up being one of the most influential people in his life and he still wasn't sure how. But he'd started using his fire quirk during training exercises. Unfortunately, Shoto still had to deal with his father. After the sports festival he'd chosen to intern with him. He knew it was logical. Pro-hero endeavor was just about the best he could hope for in terms of internships. And not choosing him even though he could would just be petty. Though Shoto did want to do it. Things had been as strained as usual. Until the attack on Hosu. Then things had gotten very chaotic. Shoto stood in the main square, working with his father and the rest of the heroes to fight the strange monsters who'd shown up. He glances up from the fray and sees Izuku. He's standing on the edge of the plaza, hands in his pockets, watching the chaos and fighting like it's a sports game he doesn't know the rules to. Shoto hesitantly raises his hand and waves at Izuku. Izuku sees him then. He smiles widely and waves back, like people weren't being terrorized by monsters in the plaza between them. Izuku makes a come here gesture with his hand. Shoto glances around, but none of the other heroes are paying attention to him at the moment. Shoto glances at his dad, then at Izuku. It's an easy decision. He jogs across the plaza to where Izuku is standing. Hi Shoto. Izuku says, smiling widely. It's good to see you again. Hope everything's going well. How's your mom been? Shoto takes a second to adjust to the fact that nothing in the entire world is capable of phasing Izuku. He looks like this is the same as any day. He's wearing the same clothes he would wear to work back before. His hair is dyed black. He's got on another one of his backpacks. Hi Izuku. She's doing well. She says it's a shame you're not working for us anymore, Shoto says. But right now there's a bunch of monsters attacking people right here. Oh, yeah. Izuku looks at the monsters crawling across the plaza. Then he grabs Shoto's arm and pulls him back away from the mess. They go a few steps, then a monster is thrown through the wall they've been standing in front of. It lays there, dazed, half buried in the debris from the building. Ha, Izuku says, peering around Shoto. What is that? I don't know, Shoto says with a shrug. Oh, okay, whatever, it'll probably come up later, Izuku says, then starts walking in the opposite direction. Shoto follows him without thinking about it. Years of practice following Izuku to avoid his father make it seem natural as anything. Where are we going? Shoto asks. Oh, I'm not actually sure, but I think it's important. Izuku pulls up his sleeve and shows Shoto his arm. There are dark, curving lines running along his skin, emanating from a point on the back of his wrist. They're dark green and glitter almost reflectively, then run up his arm and around his elbow. The more lines there are, the more important it is. I think. Shoto spends a while thinking about this. This sort of thing seems natural to Izuku. Like this is just how the world's arranged. When something's important, his arm is covered in lines. Shoto decides that asking Izuku more questions will probably only lead to more questions and drops the subject. He follows Izuku a few blocks until they find a small alleyway. As they're approaching, Izuku pulls on a golden mask. It covers his entire face. Shoto can just see his eyes through the dark holes in the mask. When he sees Shoto looking at him, he gives him a thumbs up. Inside the alleyway is the hero killer Stain, who's standing above one of Shoto's classmates. Ida. He doesn't seem to be moving. There's another body laying on the ground on the other side of the alley. Shoto hopes they're not hurt too badly. Who's that? Izuku asks. He's standing with his hands linked behind his head, looking into the alleyway with vague curiosity. That's my classmate. His name is Ida, Shoto says. That's your classmate? Izuku hisses. Then he seems to notice Ida for the first time. Oh, wait, the guy on the ground? I thought you meant, okay, never mind. That's the moment when Stain finally turns around to look at them. His face distorting into something inhuman. Who are you? Can't you see I'm doing something important? Murder? Izuku says like it's a guessing game. He starts walking into the alleyway. Oh, yeah. I know you from something. You're that Stain guy I saw you on the news. You like kill people. That's messed up, dude. Don't, Ida shouts from behind Stain. This is my fight. Shoto's glad that his classmate's not dead. But that's a weird thing to say when you're lying on the ground under a villain about to kill you. That's the moment when Stain leaps up at them. Shoto grabs Izuku's arm and hauls him backward. He falls like a pug down a flight of stairs, tumbling and rolling a little. But Shoto can't quite focus on that for the moment, since Stain is trying to kill him. The hero killer moves absurdly quickly. Shoto jumps away from him and dodges the slices of his blade. Stain quickly lands a hit and slices a long cut along Shoto's calf. He sends a flood of fire at Stain, who jumps backward. Shoto immediately regrets doing it, when he realizes that he's just sent Stain directly to Izuku. But somehow he doesn't die. Izuku has lined himself up right behind Stain. He grabs the bloody knife from Stain's hand as he regains his footing. Izuku takes a few steps back and Stain pulls out another knife. Izuku dodges, somehow. He's reacting so fast that it almost seems like he's moving before Stain begins his attacks. Each swing of Stain's knife is lightning fast, slicing through the air with unimaginable speed and accuracy. Shoto had access to both ice and fire, and years of training, and he'd only avoided a few attacks. Somehow, Izuku is dodging every single one, even though it looks like he's falling down a flight of stairs. Each step somehow seems accidental, and once he even trips in such a way that Stain's knife slices an inch off of his hair instead of his fingers. But Stain doesn't land a hit for long enough that Shoto can send a pillar of ice between the two. Stain leaps backward and crouches with his back to the wall. Izuku slips on the ice and lands flat on his back. Shoto runs to him and offers him a hand up. Thanks, Izuku says. Shoto pulls him to his feet. Izuku actually looks phased now. His breathing is fast and he's finally actually paying attention to the enemy. Shoto finds this both reassuring and terrifying. Then Izuku pulls a fire extinguisher from his bag and sprays the cut in Shoto's leg with it. Even Stain is quiet for a few moments. Why did you just do that? Shoto asks. Oh, I honestly have no idea, Izuku mutters. He uses the fire extinguisher to spray down the knife and flicks it onto the ground behind him. It just seemed like a good idea? Oh, I see, Stain says. You know my quirk then? You know that if I taste your blood I can paralyze you. How clever of you to figure it out so quickly. Ha, Izuku says quietly. Then he shouts, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. Stain freezes. Shoto thinks that the look on his face could crack concrete. Then Izuku turns, walks a half-dozen steps toward the entrance to the alley and starts climbing a dumpster like it was the most normal thing in the world. Who are you? Stain asks. There's rage on his face, but there's also something like wariness. Like he thinks that Izuku is a little more than he seems. Shoto agrees with that sentiment. He's currently having the same realization. Meh. No one you've heard of, Izuku says. Then stands on his toes to wrap a hand around the ladder of a fire escape, then jerks it downward. It makes an awful shrieking sound, then rolls down to the ground. The whole thing looks like it's mostly made of rust. I go by Foresight. This isn't really my normal gig though. But I found myself around, so I figured. He shrugs, then reaches for his backpack. That's the moment when Stain attacks. Shockingly fast. Shoto doesn't even have the chance to start pulling at his quirk. Izuku once again reacts instantly. He jumps toward the fire escape ladder. He manages to hang on, but awkwardly swings his body around. The fire escape makes a truly awful sound, then the whole thing begins to tear away from the wall. Time slows down for a moment and Shoto realizes he's in danger just in time to start jumping backward. A wave of tangled metal and dust falls down around Izuku. It feels like the whole alley is collapsing around them and Shoto can barely keep track of what's going on. Then Shoto lurches forward, afraid that Izuku's been crushed by the metal. But when the dust clears, Izuku is sitting on the dumpster, not even scratched. The dumpster itself had been partially crushed by the weight. He leans forward, trying to get a look at the huge pile of rubble that blocks most of the alleyway. There's a sound from underneath the rusted pile of scrap that had been a fire escape just moments before. Shoto takes a few steps forward. Under the pile he sees a pair of terrifying eyes, staring at him. I'll kill you. I'll kill you all, Stain hisses. Izuku climbs down from the dumpster. He's not graceful the way that most heroes are, like he doesn't do things like this often. He just stumbles off the dumpster and barely catches himself with his hands. He reaches into his bag and pulls out the fire extinguisher. So his quirk paralyzes people after he tastes their blood, huh? He asks, crouching down in front of the pile. Hey guy. You should probably close your eyes and mouth. Google says this stuff is a bit toxic. Then he sprays down the hero killer with a fire extinguisher, taking care to get each one of his weapons. That should keep him from managing that again, at least I think that's the point. He shrugs and packs the fire extinguisher away. I should probably head out. He pats Shoto's shoulder and wanders back to the mouth of the alley. Shoto trots to keep up with him. Once Izuku's out of sight of the alleyway, he pulls off the golden mask he'd put on for the fight. You're leaving? Shoto asks. Oh, sorry, Izuku says, rubbing the back of his neck. Shoto realizes that Izuku doesn't have a single scratch on him. He looks exactly the same as the beginning of the fight. But heroes are probably going to show up soon and all that. Oh, Shoto says, yeah, that makes sense. Nice to catch up again. Yeah, Izuku says, smiling bright. He holds his hand out for a fist bump, and Shoto hesitantly reciprocates. He takes a few steps away, then pauses and looks back at Shoto. Could you, not tell anyone my name? He asks almost sheepishly. You could tell them I said my name was Foresight, but I've got this whole thing going on and it might be an issue if... Sure, Shoto says with a shrug. He didn't really mind. Something about Izuku's weirdness made it seem like the normal rules shouldn't apply to him anyway. I'll see ya. See ya, Izuku says with a bright smile. Then he starts jogging away in a seemingly random direction. Shoto stares back at him, then walks back into the alley with his hands in his pockets. He pulls out his phone, then glances through all the twisted metal at Stain. The hero killer is covered with fire extinguisher foam and still trapped. But his expression is curdling and intense. Plus his face is just creepy. Shoto shifts away uncomfortably. He wanders over to Ida and the other hero just for the sake of staying away. Shoto sends out an emergency beacon to other heroes and sits next to the other body he'd seen in the alley. He looks like a hero. Shoto checks his pulse and finds that he's alive, though unconscious. Shoto starts wrapping the cuts in bandages, trying to muster up all his first aid knowledge. Who was that? Ida asks. Whatever he'd been dealing with before seems to have been backburnered to focus on the total mess of confusion that is Izuku. Foresight, Shoto says, apparently. It takes a few minutes for the heroes to arrive. In that time, Ida's paralysis finally ran out and he'd helped Shoto wrap the other hero's injuries. Shoto wraps the shallow cut on his calf and helps Ida with his own injuries. Then Shoto's father is there and there's lots of shouting. When Shoto shows them the hero killer trapped under a pile of metal, there's even more shouting. When they ask what happened, Shoto says that a masked civilian approached him and asked for help. He'd followed and found Stain along with the other heroes. When he explains that the civilian had then taken down Stain with a fire escape, the reactions had mostly been disbelief. When Shoto says that the civilian called himself Foresight, the questions change and become more pointed. At one point he repeats the whole story to a rapt audience of reporters and cameras. Eventually Stain is carted away. Shoto and Ida are taken to a hospital. Shoto listens to his father talk at him for a while, then goes to sleep. It was nice to see his friend again. Circumstances notwithstanding. The next day, a number of heroes and detectives have endless questions about who Foresight is. Shoto deals with the interviews with slow breaths and patience that rivals nations, even when one of the heroes who interviews him is his homeroom teacher. Shoto's patience is tested, but he keeps Izuku's secrets. His quirk sends him to the store, where he gets some silver hair dye and a new contour palette. He gets the idea. He spends an hour or so getting ready, putting on baggy flamboyant clothes and subtle heels that give him a few inches of height. Then he carefully applies makeup that makes him look years older than he is. He dyes his hair and looks in the mirror. With the makeup and new hair color he's close to unrecognizable. Suddenly he's struck with an idea funny enough that he totally needs to do it. He pulls out his palette and starts creating a rather realistic scar which starts from the bottom of his right ear and crosses the bridge of his nose. He leaves enough red tones and layers of foundation to add some texture. He adds some bags under his eyes and sprays some makeup setter on his face. He thinks the result is rather good, and it makes him fairly certain that even if someone saw him after this they would be unlikely to pick him out of a crowd. Time for a show then. He makes his way across the town and finds a nice place for a dinner of teriyaki and rice. Then at just before 8, he makes his way to a street he's never seen before. The place is some seedy-looking bar, set under the level of the street. He settles his shoulders, then realizes that he has no desire to be serious, and it would probably be best to convince them that he's an idiot, or insane. Well, perhaps he should channel a bit of Leader. He laughs at the thought, trying to feel guilty and failing. He's pretty sure that Leader is a poor role model for actual villain behavior, but at the very least, it would make him seem somewhat unhinged. He bounces on his toes, then starts to whistle a tune under his breath before loudly slamming the door of the bar open. He must have interrupted something as the group of people standing inside violently turns toward the door. It's an interesting group. Nearest to the door is a man and a woman who he hasn't seen before. The man is tall with dark clothes and black hair. His face and arms are covered with discolored and painful-looking scars. He looks relaxed but predatory. The woman is blonde and wearing a school uniform. She has sharp teeth and eyes that shine with a manic light. Behind them is another man who Izuku recognizes. Shigaraki. Behind the bar of the counter is the man made out of smoke, Kurogiri. Salutations, fellow villains. Izuku shouts, bowing deeply before bouncing to his feet. It is an honor to meet me. There's a long moment of silence. Who the fuck are you? Shigaraki asks. Language, Izuku says, scandalized that the man would curse around a 15-year-old. I am the overlord of knowledge. I can know anything I wish. They just give him blank looks. I take it you have not heard of me. That is acceptable, Izuku says. You see, my quirk lets me know things about people. Izuku leans into the role. It didn't matter if nothing he said was factual. He was acting and he was going to be the overlord of knowledge. But the looks that Izuku are getting are only hostile and incredulous. For example, you two, your names are Shigaraki Tamura and Kurogiri. Izuku pauses then adds, not real names, but I wouldn't want to break any confidentiality. Safe bet, those names sounded fake as anything. You recently attacked a number of students of UA, but were unable to complete your objective to kill All Might. Even more hostility now. Okay. Subject change time. But enough about myself. I believe that I've taken your spotlight for far too long. I must admit that your attack on the USJ was quite impressive regardless of its outcome, quite beyond my own ability, Izuku says, gesturing toward Shigaraki. Now, I believe that it is time for business. Izuku hoped that it wasn't clear to the villains that he had no idea what the business that he was referring to actually was. Shigaraki's hostility evaporates. He seems pleased with Izuku's praise. As I said, we're going to do what Stain wanted to do. What he couldn't accomplish before he was captured. We're going to destroy the heroes. His face really is creepy now that Izuku can see it up close. Oh, Izuku says, leaning forward, Stain was a true example of honor. He believed in everything that he ever said or did. I know, sighs the woman dreamily, there's just something about the original that you can't meet. What a man. And those murders in Shikoku? Masterpieces. She sighs and slumps into one of the bar chairs. I couldn't agree with you more, Izuku says. There's something about his drive. It's just inspiring. Shame he was captured, a great loss for the community. That guy, Shigaraki mutters. Who cares that he was caught? The Nomu attack was much more damaging and widespread. But is anyone talking about that? No. All they want to talk about is Stain and Foresight. Fucking NPCs. Izuku files away Nomu as the name of those monsters that were attacking before he found Stain. Then the scarred man grabs Izuku by the scruff of his jacket. Hey, the woman interjects. We were talking. Before we get into that, the scarred man says. How did you know that this meeting was taking place? Izuku doesn't bother with trying to escape. The grip on his collar is strong enough that Izuku doesn't like his chances of breaking it. But he shifts around until he can see the man's scarred face. Well, I told you, didn't I? Izuku says, trying and failing to shrug. I'm the overlord of knowledge. And anything that I want to know I can know. Really? The man says. He holds Izuku up with one arm and lifts him up to eye level. What is it that you know exactly? Izuku stares at him. Not sure what exactly he's supposed to do. His quirk is doing something strange. It's curling around his arms in a geometric pattern. He feels it curl up his arms along his neck. He can feel the vines climbing up and around his face. Sharp and focused. The scarred man sees the vines around Izuku's face. His eyes narrow and his grip tightens. Smoke starts rising from his jacket shoulders. Izuku's got to know the answer, right? His quirk wouldn't leave him with nothing. He stares up at the villain. Then something clicks. Smoke and thus a fire quirk. And there's something in the face. It's scarred, and now that Izuku's close he can see clearly that his hair is dyed. It's not naturally black. And Izuku knows who this man looks like. The family that this man looks like. He's got Todoroki Rei's eyes. He's got a face like Shoto. His eyebrows are the exact same color as Fuyumi's. The Todoroki, because Izuku knows that's what he is, seems uncomfortable with Izuku staring directly at him. Did you know? Izuku says slowly, smile stretching too wide across his face, twisting along with the vines. That your brother finally visited your mother? The first time in years. His scarred face tightens. Izuku's smile grows. And that he's been avoiding your father? The Todoroki drops Izuku. Izuku lands gracelessly on the floor and ends up sprawled across the ground. His smile remains fixed in place across his face. He laughs from his position on the ground. The vines tuck themselves back away, curling back into the twin freckles on his wrists. Then he pulls himself off of the ground. The Todoroki steps away from him, like he doesn't want Izuku to touch him. There's blue fire crawling along his shoulders now. Izuku stretches and yawns. Man, that was a good one. Izuku glances back at this new Todoroki. You've got quite the family history, you know. I can kill you, the Todoroki responds. I'm aware, Izuku says, then he bows politely. Please place full trust in my confidentiality. Your history is your own. Then he turns to the rest of the villains. Do you require your own demonstration? Izuku asks sweetly. I'm sure I could try my power with you also. He's met only with silence. Shigaraki's hands are clenched. Even the unhinged woman is staring at Izuku with a wary gaze. The silence grows longer, which is the moment when the TV in the corner turns on. Izuku looks at it as the sound of static starts blasting. Then a voice comes out. I see that you have an unusual gift, says a deep and rasping voice. Izuku glances around, the Todoroki and the woman seem surprised, but Shigaraki and Kurogiri are just focused on the screen. Izuku bows theatrically to the screen. Thank you, your praise speaks well of your discernment, Izuku says, unsure of what else to say. I must ask you though, what exactly drew your interest to this group? There's something calculated lying just under the question. Well, in cases of people being just a little too interested in you, lie. Izuku is reminded of those files he found. Of that story of two great powers, heroes and a villain working against each other for years. Izuku doesn't know where the thought came from, but he does know one thing. He has a whopper of a lie. Some of it's almost true even. Ah, I see, you might have noticed that I've not revealed this yet, Izuku says, pressing his hand to his chest. But he lets the tension and attention build. There is another reason that I want to join your cause. This reason is one of my own, Izuku says. The vigilante who goes by the name Foresight. The attention of the room snaps like a whip. That fucker that warned the heroes about our attack, Shigaraki hisses, who took down Stain and stole our spotlight. The very individual, Izuku agrees. He is my sworn enemy. It is my greatest mission to work against him. After I learned that he was working against you, I thought that there is no better ally than the enemy of your enemy. I see, the voice from the television says thoughtfully. Until recently, this Foresight has been hiding under the notice of all of us. I take it you were doing the same? Quite so. Once he revealed himself to the world, I knew that I had to do the same, Izuku says. You say that you can know all, yet you seem to know little of your greatest enemy. Izuku faked controlled outrage. I assure you, I am Foresight's most potent enemy. Izuku paused, staring into the wall. But he knows me, and our quirks are the perfect foils to one another's. Mine tells me of the past and present of what is nearest to me. His tells him of things far away and in the future. Our conflict has raged long years. But nonetheless, your long conflict speaks of a lack of power on your part. The voice says, what use is an ally without power? Izuku simply nods. Then let me prove myself to you, Izuku says, then flounders because he has no idea what he's supposed to do. Fake his own death? Fight the fake villain version of himself? There's something that I want you to get for me, the voice speaks. Something that is rightfully mine, but was taken before I could collect it. What is it? Izuku asks. An important relic. It once rested in a museum, but it was stolen months ago. Recently, the police learned who it was. There's controlled rage in that tone. Through my contacts, I have learned that it was the individual who calls himself Foresight. Izuku happens to know exactly what this item is. The memory stick. Currently, it's in one of his dresser drawers. And he now knows exactly who this person on the screen is. Because his quirk would only draw him here for one reason. This was the villain all for one. And Izuku is exactly where he needs to be. He swallows. The knowledge of exactly how many heroes this villain has killed rising up in him. So this was what his quirk had been working toward. It was bringing him to all for one. Ah yes, Izuku says, smothering any feelings but those of the villain overlord of knowledge. I know what it is that you want. And I will spare no expense in bringing it to you. Izuku is ushered out quickly after that. He makes promises that he will have the memory stick soon and is left alone on the street. He stands outside, feeling the vines unfurling and creeping along his skin. They brush against his chin and twirl in pleased patterns across his back. His quirk is thoroughly satisfied, but Izuku only feels the first hint of dread rising up. This was getting bigger than he'd ever expected. But his quirk knows best. His quirk will protect him. It knows exactly what it's doing. Right? Aizawa Shoyuta wants to bang his head into a wall. He's been working on the Foresight case for 6 hours now. Detective work wasn't his normal wheelhouse, but this vigilante was related to the villains who tried to kill his students, so he had a bit of a personal stake in the whole investigation. The first problem was that Foresight seems to have only now appeared. Of course, there were reports of people using the name in the past, but it was so generic that there were mentions of vigilantes, villains, and heroes using the name in the previous decade, but none of them lined up even vaguely with the vigilante they were interacting with, or gave any indication they were connected in any way. The name implied some kind of prescient or mastermind quirk, but so far there was no clues to what specific abilities or limitations his quirk might have. And there was always the option that the name itself had been chosen to throw them off the scent. But that train of thought only led to a headache, so Shoyuta was trying to figure out what he did know for certain. He'd looked into the museum that Foresight had mentioned during their conversation and found a report of a fairly uninteresting break-in. Apparently the thieves had set a firework to distract security and had snuck out in maintenance uniforms. Nothing else had ever come of it, and after insurance came around, no one had thought to thoroughly follow up the incident. Still, Shoyuta sent out feelers to his contacts, trying to see if there had been anything especially important in that museum, but felt that it might just be another dead end. There was no mention of the name of the thieves in the report, and Shoyuta couldn't even be sure that Foresight was telling the truth about being the one who'd robbed the museum. Other paths of investigation hadn't given them anything either. They'd pulled the record of the phone which the vigilante had used to contact them. They'd found a match on a flip phone with a prepaid SIM card that had been bought 3 years ago. They'd pulled the call record and found that the first call that it had ever made was the one to Hawks, then just after the attack the call to Principal Nedzu, then the one he'd made to Shoyuta. They'd gone to the corner store that it had been bought from, but the camera records had long been erased and the cashier remembered nothing of the purchase. The most frustrating part was that the vigilante did seem to be giving them at least some good information, but most of it was impossible to verify. He'd freely given them information about the villains, and from the investigating they'd done so far all of it had been true. But they still couldn't really confirm anything. Kurogiri had been a headache to track down, but they'd found a match. He was a known criminal with a quirk that exactly matched what they'd seen at the USJ. But Shigaraki Tamura hadn't matched anything that they could find. Regardless, it was more than they'd found from any other source. Worse for Shoyuta, personally, was that Foresight had saved the life of one of his students. Shoyuta had ignored the clear signs that something was wrong with Ida, and it was only because of Foresight that Ida was alive at all. Not only that, Foresight had apparently lured Todoroki to the scene as well, putting another one of Shuta's students in danger. That, even more than the fact that Foresight had launched himself into being a household name by taking down Stain, was what was bothering Shoyuta. If it wasn't for the vigilante, his student would be dead. And he still doesn't even know if he can trust Foresight. It makes Shoyuta want to bang his head into a wall. Shoyuta pulls up the recording of his conversation with Foresight. He's listened to it a dozen times, hoping to get some clue of who the vigilante is. Shoyuta rubs his eyes and sighs. He isn't getting anywhere. He needs a break. He stands up from his desk. He's been using a small office in the police station. Lend it to him while the investigation is ongoing. It's sufficient for what he needs, which is a quiet place to look through police files and take naps when necessary. He leaves his phone and papers out on his desk. It's against procedure, but he's confident enough of the police headquarters security. He shoves his hands in his pockets and slumps through the police offices. It's a little busier than he prefers, but he can deal with it. He gets to the public lobby and glances around. There's the normal lines of people. A couple of beat cops, nothing out of the ordinary. He's about to step outside and is shuffling around the things in his pocket to pull out his wallet when there's something loud behind him. He turns and sees some woman shouting at one of the officers. He watches to see if he should step in. He's distracted and maybe sleep-deprived, but he still reacts strongly when he feels someone run into him from behind. He turns quickly, arms shifting to grab at the offender, ready for a fight like any hero would be. The kid who's just run into him falls on his ass. It's not graceful either. Shuta's arm had pushed him away and the kid makes a desperate attempt to grab Shuta's hand, but doesn't get a good grip and just unbalances himself. His arms pinwheel, then he trips on his own feet and lands flat on his back, winding himself. Shoyuta stares down at him. The fight's still going on behind him, and little attention is paid to the two of them. The kid looks up at Shoyuta trying to get his breath back. He looks a few years older than Shuta's students. He's got silver hair which might be dyed and is arrayed in unruly curls around his face. His face is plain, something that Shoyuta honestly wouldn't pick out of a crowd. He also is laying on the ground because of a feat of clumsiness Shoyuta thought children grew out of by that age. His kids would never do something like that. The kid's finally pulling himself off of the ground. Wow, the kid finally says. His expression is a little shocked, which is understandable. Sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going, I guess. Ha. Shoyuta remembers that he's supposed to act like a hero. Are you alright, he says. He thinks that maybe that should have had a little more inflection, but he's tired, okay? Yeah. Are you okay? The kid tugs at his clothes. Yes. Shoyuta, now that the kid is moving on his own power, decides that he's had enough of the conversation. I've got to go now. I would suggest watching where you are going in the future. Will do, the kid says, smiling weakly. Sorry. Shoyuta just nods and finally gets out of the building. He tries to forget it, but something about the kid had been off. He isn't sure about what it is, but he decides to put it out of his mind. He finds a place that sells ramen and tries to relax for at least a few minutes. Izuku leaves his apartment and heads to the store. He buys a small bag of disinfectant wipes, a strong magnet, a pen, and a box of Ziploc bags. In his pockets he has his RFID emulator. He's wearing nondescript street clothes and a bit of makeup to make him look a few years older than he is. He's also got on a jacket that's just a bit too long at the sleeves, leaving his hands covered. He follows the directions of his quirk until he finds the building it's guiding him toward. He stops in front of it for a long moment, sure that his quirk can't be serious. Izuku stares up at the police station. Well, this is a little weird. He tugs his clothes into order. Then he feels his quirk tug at his wrists, and he readjusts his sleeves until they're pulled most of the way over his hands. Izuku takes a deep breath and walks through the doors, shoulders firmly in place. There's a bit too much going on at once. There's a bunch of people inside and there's someone shouting. Izuku glances around, trying to catch sight of what's going on. Then he runs into someone. The man shifts around quickly, like he'd been tense and ready for a fight. His arm knocks into Izuku's chest and it sends him reeling backward. Izuku's quirk sends an impulse and his hand snatches forward before his brain even begins to process what's going on. He feels his hand close around the man's, then feels it steal something from his grip. Then physics takes over and Izuku begins to tumble backwards. He windmills his arms, trying to keep himself from falling, then his feet tangle together and he's suddenly on the ground. His back impacts the ground and the breath leaves his lungs in a rush. It really hurts and it takes him a few moments to finally catch his breath, but even while he's distracted, he feels his hands moving at request of his quirk. His hands slip something shaped like a credit card into his loose sleeves. Izuku finally can breathe and looks up and sees the man he'd run into. He really hopes that his fall hadn't looked as undignified as it had felt. His breath stutters. That is definitely Eraserhead. The last time Izuku had seen him, it had been dark and chaotic and the man's face had been covered in mud, but this was definitely him. Izuku's mouth moves for a moment, not sure what he should say. The man looks kind of tired and annoyed, but mostly like he wants to be anywhere else but right here. But the hero doesn't seem to actually know who Izuku is. So Izuku decides he will definitely try and keep it that way. Izuku pushes himself to his feet, conscious of the credit card thing in his sleeve. Wow, Izuku says, wincing at how winded he still sounds. Sorry? What should he say? Wasn't looking where I was going, I guess. Ahaha. The hero looks profoundly uncomfortable. Are you alright? Eraserhead says with absolutely no inflection. Yeah. Are you okay? Izuku asks. He tugs at his clothes, trying to push the card thing further into his sleeve. Yes, Eraserhead says, looking past Izuku at the door. I've got to go now. I suggest watching where you are going in the future. Will do, Izuku says weakly. Sorry. Eraserhead just nods, then walks out through the door. Izuku is left staring at his back and then the closing door. So that went alright, all things considered. Izuku glances around, there are a couple people still looking at him, and he ducks his head and settles down on one of the seats in the room. He spends a few minutes calming down and looking at the room around him. It's a lobby for the police station. There are more than 24 people there. There's a door in the back that draws Izuku's attention. He watches as one of the cops goes to it, scans some sort of card, then walks in. So that's the way into the back of the building. Probably this is where the official stuff happens. His quirk draws his attention to his wrist and to the card thing in his sleeve. He pulls it out and looks at it. It's plain white. No name, no numbers. He flips it over in his hand, then glances up at the door. So, Izuku had just stolen the hero's keys. Basically. He snorts. Then his quirk pulls at him again. Izuku slips the card into his pocket, then stands up and stretches. Izuku had expected to go to the door, but it brings him to a water cooler instead. He thinks that maybe his quirk is having a breakdown or something, but fills a paper cup a quarter up with water. This time the pull on his wrists pulls him to the door. He almost walks through it, but his quirk pulls him away. He leans against the wall next to it and pulls out his phone. He flips through random apps for a minute, then a couple of cops walk through the door. They don't notice Izuku. They walk through the lobby, then out the front door. Just as they leave, Izuku's hands pull at him. He pushes off the wall, pulls the card from his pocket, then scans it at the reader in the door's lock. He holds his breath, then the light flashes green and the lock clicks. He opens it and walks through. It's not really as exciting as he hoped. The walls are pale and beige. There are cubicles and some people talking down the hallway. Izuku shoves his hands into his pockets and follows the pull of his hands through the hallways. Twice, he stops and leans against a wall as someone walks past. No one pays much attention to him. Eventually he finds a small door in the corner of the building. His hands tug at him and he pulls out the card and presses it to the electric lock on the door. The small light blinks green and the lock clicks. Izuku opens the door, glances around, then sticks his tongue out at the police station. Ah, take that. He slips inside and takes a look around. It's a dull-looking office. Kind of small and without much resembling decoration. There's a small flower pot near the small window and Izuku steps closer to check it out. It's not quite in bloom and looks a little bit sad. He pours the water he'd gotten earlier into the pot, then shifts it to the other side of the windowsill so that it'll get a little more sun. He sets the empty cup next to the pot. Then he turns to give his attention to the desk. There's a phone and a couple of papers scattered around. He picks them up and looks through them. They're investigation reports. They list all the things that Izuku has done as Foresight. He finds records of them investigating his phone, along with a transcript of his conversations with them. There's a lot about him taking down Stain too, including what looks like a transcript of an interrogation of Shoto. Izuku feels a little bit bad about that. Okay, this is interesting. But what should he do here? He picks up the phone and clicks on the screen. It has a default home screen. He follows the push of his quirk and types in the 6-digit passcode. He swipes through a couple emails and realizes this is definitely Eraserhead's phone. He sets the phone down and sits down on the chair. His quirk pulls again and Izuku takes out his flip phone. He dials a number digit by digit, then pushes the call button. The phone on the desk rings. Izuku stares at it until the ring stops and his phone tells him to leave a message. He spends a few moments trying to think of what he should say, then shrugs. Yo. Hey Eraserhead. Seems like you left your phone in your office. Your plant was looking a little rough so I watered it, by the way. Anyways, I'll just leave a message. So, just a general update. I've gotten more information on those villain guys. They're still planning on killing All Might and all that. So that's an issue. They're recruiting more villains now. So watch out for that, I guess. Izuku stares at the ceiling, thinking of what else he should say. Oh yeah. Also, another thing that you should know. There's this guy working with Shigaraki, he calls himself Overlord of Knowledge. Yeah, I know. Who even comes up with a name like that? Total megalomaniac. Anyway, the guy absolutely hates me. He might try and get at me. So watch out for that. He's got an information gathering quirk and just really doesn't like me. Anyway, that's about it. Have a nice day. I'll see ya. Izuku hangs up. Alright. Well, that's done. He packs the phone away, then takes out the RFID emulator. He presses the buttons that his quirk instructs, and then presses the hero's ID to the device. It makes a happy beep sound. He packs both away again. Then he's pulled toward the computer. He logs in with a long password that his quirk gives him, then uses the RFID emulator and presses it to the reader on the computer. It unlocks. So it seems that Izuku now has a passable copy of a hero's pass to get into police records and buildings. Might be handy. His hands pull him around the computer and he enters into some computer database, then creates a new entry. He pauses, then his quirk starts pulling at his fingers. It's a little awkward, but he follows the pull of his fingers to start typing. The witness reported seeing a villain who called himself Overlord of Knowledge. The entire interaction only lasted a few minutes. The witness did not get a clear view of the villain's face, but describes him as short and wearing bright clothing. The villain claimed to have taken something that no one would notice missing, but did not clarify further. No objects were found missing during the ensuing investigation. Izuku entered the text, filled a few text boxes with numbers and letters that he didn't know the meaning of, then backdated the entry to 11 years ago, and then created a few more entries. He also added small bits of text to already existing records. The informant added that there was some mention of a villain known as Overlord of Knowledge said to be active in the area. The informant has no further information about this individual. The prisoner mentioned a villain known as Overlord of Knowledge, who had reportedly hired a number of other criminals over the last few years. And so on it went. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes. When it was all done, there were more than a dozen mentions of this fictional villain in the police's records. All entries were backdated, with the earliest being over a decade ago and the most recent being a few months ago. Izuku pulls away from the computer, then feels a tug from his bag. He brings out the magnet he'd bought, then feels a tug toward the large computer sitting on the ground. He pushes out the chair, then sits cross-legged on the floor. His hands twitch and press the magnet to one panel of the computer. There's an odd sound from the monitor on the desk and Izuku looks up at it. The screen is glitching and jumping around. Izuku moves the magnet across the computer, and the screen frizzes before changing to a disconnected screen. Izuku passes the magnet across the computer a few more times. He leaves the magnet on the computer and reaches up to the monitor. He tries to connect it to the computer and nothing comes up. So Izuku bricked the hero's computer, for some reason. But his quirk is pulling at his hands again, so there's more important things to think about. Izuku grabs one of the papers on the desk and pulls the pen from his bag. Izuku feels a delicate pull on his fingers and starts to write. It's awkward, the tugs at his fingers make his penmanship look truly atrocious, but he ignores that. He's writing out a series of names. Nothing that Izuku recognizes, but most of them have titles like detective or officer before them, so Izuku thinks they have something to do with the police. Once his quirk is satisfied, the list is around 24 names long. Izuku waits, but his quirk doesn't give him any more instructions. He shrugs and adds a doodle of a snake at the end of the page. Finally, Izuku's quirk fully pulls back, and he stretches his hands above his head. Well, that was pretty good work. He turns off the monitor, then set Eraserhead's ID card in the center of the desk. He then takes the disinfectant wipes from his bag and cleans anything he'd touched while in the office. Once that was done, he stands with his hands on his hips and nods. Good work. He has no idea why he'd done it though. Maybe he'd figure it out sometime. Izuku slips out of the office, leaving the door open a crack behind him. After most of an hour spent trying and failing to relax at the ramen shop, Aizawa Shoyuta gives up. He pays and heads back to the police headquarters. As he's walking into the building, Detective Tsukachi flags him down and walks in with him to the back of the station. The conversation is mostly them rehashing the same fruitless leads, and he soon decides to return to his office. As he approaches his office, he sees that the door is slightly ajar. The hairs of the back of his neck rise. This is wrong. This shouldn't happen. He was sure that he'd closed it. Worry rises up in his chest. Had he left it open? He'd left his phone in the office. He takes a few more steps and enters. Everything seems the same. Maybe he just made a mistake. Then he sees his ID card on his desk. Had he lost it? Had someone returned it to his desk? Why didn't they just return it to him? He grabs it and stuffs it into his pocket. Shoyuta picks up his phone and sees that there's a new notification. The worry returns. It's a voicemail. He plays it. Yo. Hey Eraserhead. Seems like you left your phone in your office. Your plant was looking a little rough, so I watered it by the way. Anyways, I'll just leave a message. It was a familiar voice, one that Shoyuta had been examining recordings of for dozens of hours. The vigilante Foresight. He pauses the message. Foresight had known that he wasn't in his office. That his phone was there. The vigilante. Shoyuta glances up and for the first time notices the plant on the windowsill. It looks sad and wilted, and there's a paper cup sitting next to it that Shoyuta knows wasn't in here when he left just an hour ago. The vigilante had been here. Shoyuta is reminded of that kid who'd run into him, who'd seemed a little off, a little familiar. That's the moment when he finally puts it together that the voice on the recording is the same as the kid's voice. The hairs on the back of Shuta's neck stand up and his quirk activates without him meaning it to. Shoyuta had seen Foresight. Had literally run into him. The vigilante must have taken his ID during his fall somehow. The vigilante had planned his moves so carefully. Had been exactly where he needed to be and understood Shuta's routines enough to perfectly slip past him and get into the police station. He'd grabbed Shuta's ID without Shoyuta noticing. Just to get into Shuta's head. Or maybe not. Maybe he had some other plan. Shoyuta hates this. Hates this so much. He clenches his hands and stares at the phone, pushes down the irrational urge to throw it at the wall, or leave the station to go hole away in a safe house somewhere. Instead, he steps out of the office and closes the door behind him, then continues listening to the message. So, just a general update. I've gotten more information on those villain guys. They're still planning on killing All Might and all that. So that's an issue. They're recruiting more villains now. So watch out for that, I guess. There's a few seconds of pause, like the vigilante is considering whether he should say the next thing. Oh yeah. Also, another thing that you should know. There's this guy working with Shigaraki, he calls himself Overlord of Knowledge. Yeah, I know. Who even comes up with a name like that? Total megalomaniac. Anyway, the guy absolutely hates me. He might try and get at me. So watch out for that. He's got an information gathering quirk and just really doesn't like me. Anyway, that's about it. Have a nice day. I'll see ya. The message ends. Shoyuta glances around his temporary office. This is wrong. This is terrifying. This single vigilante knew far too much for Shoyuta to trust him. But he calms himself and sends out a message that there's a contamination hazard at his office. Within minutes, a team is sent to sweep Shuta's office. But they don't find anything. No bombs, nothing hazardous, no bugs or recording devices. Nothing that explained why the vigilante had gone into Shuta's office in the first place. They do find that his computer has been bricked completely, apparently with the magnet which had been left on the computer. A touch Shoyuta took to be mocking. The text tells Shoyuta that they couldn't be sure why Foresight would have bricked the computer. The data there is automatically backed up, though the data of the computer's message traffic would be lost. Had the computer been used to send a message? One from Shuta's account? No, that was impossible. The vigilante would have needed Shuta's password to even open the computer. More questions. No more answers. Shoyuta still makes the text look through the police database for bugs or viruses. They find nothing. When he finally returns to his office, he notices something written on the back of a police report. Shoyuta knows that he hadn't written it, especially with the doodle of the snake at the bottom. It's a list of names. It takes him a few moments to recognize one. He's an officer at the precinct. Shoyuta doesn't know him well, but had worked with him before. A quick search reveals that the rest of the names are all police-affiliated. Shoyuta can't make sense of it. More questions. He folds the list and stuffs it into a pocket. Then, out of an abundance of paranoia, he decides to find himself another office. Once his account is set up on the new computer, he gets to work. He copies the voice message Foresight had left to the project file. Then takes a scan of the list of names Foresight had written and adds it too. Then he listens to the message again. At least he has a lead now. He runs a search on the name Overlord of Knowledge on the police system. No surprise, more than a dozen results come up. Nothing concrete. Just witness accounts of seeing or hearing of a villain named Overlord of Knowledge. Shoyuta starts a new file on the villain, linking the witness accounts and adding in any information that comes up. There's a number of reports, but no clear leads to who the villain is or what he can do. Shoyuta closes out of the file and stares at the ceiling. He still doesn't like anything about this. The way that this vigilante seems to always be 2 steps ahead of them, seems to be infallible, doesn't even seem to be trying most of the time. According to the interviews with Todoroki, he'd taken down Stain without even a scratch. Shoyuta finds himself almost wanting to trust the guy, just because having him as an enemy was proving such a headache. Each attempt to catch the vigilante had been a resounding failure. So much so that Shoyuta suspects he was just humoring their attempts. Shoyuta is considering just going home to start an early patrol when his phone rings. For an instant, he's convinced that it's another call from Foresight, but this time there is a caller ID. Sir Night-Eye? Shoyuta wastes 2 rings of the phone just trying to figure out why the other hero would be calling him. They worked in the same circles and Shoyuta is passingly familiar with the other hero. But he can't think of why Sir Night-Eye would want to contact him. Shoyuta answers the phone. Eraserhead speaking. This is Sir Night-Eye. Is it true that you know the vigilante who robbed the early Quirk-era museum? Shoyuta is so thrown off by the question that he says nothing for a moment. Did you get confirmation? Night-Eye asks again. If it really was him, then I might be able to offer some explanation for his actions. Yes, Shoyuta says instantly. Finally, someone with information about Foresight. Well, he claimed that it was him who'd done it. We don't have confirmation beyond that. Does it matter? Yes it does. I believe that he's sending a message. To who? Shoyuta asks, already starting the paperwork to add Sir Night-Eye to the investigation. All Might. Izuku pulls himself out of bed somewhere around noon on a Saturday. He brushes his teeth, eats breakfast and puts on some clothes. Then his quirk pulls at him and he learns that apparently he's going out today. It doesn't tell him to put on makeup or anything, but it does tell him to stop by the convenience store near his house and pick up a miniature first aid kit. He packs it away into his bag and heads to the bus station. He rides for a while and eventually reaches the same neighborhood where he'd met with the group of villains in the bar. He gets out and heads toward a different street. He has just enough time to wonder what he's supposed to do when he sees one of the villains. It's the scarred one. The one who's a Todoroki. He's dressed in dirty, dark-colored clothes. His hood is pulled up and he's leisurely walking down the street. He nears Izuku, who takes that as his cue. Izuku jogs a bit and then falls into step next to the Todoroki. He looks at Izuku like he's going to murder him, but Izuku is pretty sure that's just the guy's default look. Hey, how's things been? Izuku asks. The Todoroki does a double take when he finally recognizes Izuku. You're that guy with the stupid name? He asks. What the hell are you doing here? Talking to you. Izuku answers honestly. Why? Izuku just shrugs. And why do you look like a 12-year-old? The Todoroki asks, looking at Izuku with unsettling intensity. And where'd that scar go? I'm 15, not 12, Izuku corrects. And the scar was just makeup. What the fuck is your problem? Language, Izuku answers, and I just thought that it would be a good idea to talk since last time there were those other guys there. The Todoroki stares at him. So, what's your name? Izuku asks. I don't think I caught it last time we talked. Dabi, he says eventually. Dabi seems about to say something, but then Izuku sees a boba shop. Oh, that looks like a good spot. You like boba tea? Izuku asks. I've never had it, Dabi says. He seems a little wary, though Izuku couldn't say why. Great. Izuku leads them to the shop. He orders for both of them and leans against the counter to wait. Everyone in the store is glancing or openly staring at Dabi. It's probably his general air of looking like he's about to kill everyone within 50 feet of himself. But he doesn't say a word, just stands there staring at Izuku. It's a bit awkward honestly, but then Izuku's name is called and he goes to the front. Izuku grabs his drinks and at a prompt from his quirk he also grabs a couple of napkins and stuffs them into his bag. Izuku elects to bring them outside. They sit on a table looking out on the street. Izuku takes a sip of the boba and is pleased to note that it's pretty good. He's not really sure what the next step should be here and his quirk isn't giving him much direction at the moment. Well, honesty is the best policy. Partial honesty anyway, along with whatever lies he thinks up along the way. Izuku opens with, so, I lied to those villain guys before. Dabi chokes on his drink. Yeah, I know, but what can you do? Izuku asks with a shrug. And you're telling me because? Dabi asks. I'm one of those villain guys, and I can just tell them that. Really, you're going to tell Shigaraki? Izuku asks, that guy? Dabi flexes his hands like he's resisting strangling Izuku. Just tell me what you want, kid, Dabi says. Izuku nods. So, my power's not really knowing everything, that was a total lie. Dabi looks wary. You demonstrated otherwise, he says. There was a dangerous intelligence in those eyes. Underneath the goth clothing and massive swaths of scars. Well, about that I really didn't, Izuku says with a shrug. Like the thing with your family, right? Not a quirk. I was your dad's gardener. Dabi's boba tea leaks out the top with the force of his grip. What? Izuku pulls the napkins out from his bag and hands them over to Dabi, who takes them in a tense grip. Yeah, I worked there for a couple years, Izuku says, nodding. It's a nice enough gig if you stay away from your dad. Pays good too. Plus your siblings are pretty easy to get along with. Dabi doesn't say anything. He just stares at Izuku. So yeah, no omniscience. I just noticed that you look a lot like your family and figured that it probably wasn't a coincidence. Dabi takes a few breaths. Then he uses the napkins to wipe the boba off his hands. Why, and I feel I'm going to regret asking this, did you decide that you were going to infiltrate a villain organization? Izuku just shrugs and takes a sip of boba. Well, I wasn't really planning on doing that at first, but then I just figured I might as well go with it. Dabi looks at him. You know that we can kill you, right? He asks. Oh yeah. Izuku says cheerily. You actually can't. That's part of the lie that I told before. You see, my actual quirk means that I can't get hurt. So no matter what happens. Dabi is then moving so fast that Izuku barely has time to move. He pulls a knife and as Izuku's hands come up to block his face, swipes the knife toward Izuku. Izuku jerks back and grabs his left hand. There's a shallow cut through the meaty part near his thumb. It's over an inch long, just missing his inner palm. Dude. Izuku hisses. It stinks. You can get hurt, Dabi says pointedly. He tucks the knife away. No, not like. Well, that's not what I mean, Izuku says. What the hell? This was not what he was expecting to happen. Then he remembers the first aid kit in his bag. So it was part of the plan then. He pulls the kit from his bag and thumps it down on the table. He takes out the antiseptic wipes and cleans the cut. That was so rude, Izuku mutters. He smears some neosporin on the cut and plasters a large band-aid over it. Then he packs the kit up and puts it back into his bag. So, as I was saying, no matter what happens I'll be fine, so it doesn't matter if the situation is dangerous. Dabi stares at him for a long time. So you're just crazy. He turns away from Izuku and stares into the distance and mutters, he's just crazy. I'm literally right here, Izuku says. I seriously thought that you were a threat, Dabi says, his hand is at his forehead. I'm just like some guy. Why would you think I was dangerous? Izuku says, then brushes that aside. Anyway, since you stabbed me, I think it's fair that I ask you a question. Dabi sends him a sideways look. What is it? Why are you a villain? Like, your dad's a hero and your brother's training to be one. Why villainy? Dabi looks caught between frustration and wariness. I'm not answering that. Well, then I'll just figure it out then, Izuku says. He kicks his feet as he thinks. So, fire quirk. Similar to your dad. Based on Shoto, he probably trained you when Shoto was young. But now you're off doing your own thing and Shoto wants nothing to do with him. What? Yeah, Shoto hates training. Wants to be a hero but wants nothing to do with your dad. I've helped him avoid training with your dad like so many times. You've? Dabi starts laughing. It starts shocked but soon turns hysterical. He's leaning on the table with his elbows and his forehead is resting on his palms. You've been helping him dodge training? From the number 2 pro hero. Yeah. Izuku asks. Dabi looks like he's a nudge away from crying. Well, he doesn't want to train, so what else am I supposed to do? Dabi claps an arm on Izuku's shoulder. Yep, you're actually fucking crazy. It sounds almost complimentary. Language. I'm 15. Right. Dabi leans back away and settles into his seat. He takes a sip of boba, then makes a face and pushes it away. There's still some hysteria in his smile but he continues, so, why am I a villain, right? Right? So I was born with a pretty powerful fire quirk, Dabi says, leaning forward with a predatory gleam in his eyes. My father wanted someone to be his successor. So he trained me to be just as good as him. But the thing was, he wanted something more than that. Which is why he married my mother, who has an ice quirk. Because he hoped that their quirks would combine to something powerful. Oh no. That's terrible. Izuku's heart drops at the thought of the Todoroki's mother only marrying someone to create a child with a powerful quirk. Rei-sama doesn't deserve that. So then, wait, Rei-sama? Dabi pauses. Yes, she said to call her that. Izuku supplies. You've met my mother? Yeah. I brought her flowers. You know what, I don't care. Dabi looks a little like he does care though. Anyway, Shoto was born a few years after I started training. He basically has both of the quirks of my parents. Once my father saw that potential, he stopped wasting time on something like me. Dabi gestures to himself with a sneer, and moved on to training Shoto. But I still trained without any oversight. I managed to cause serious damage to myself in the process. Izuku glances at Dabi's extensive scars. But no one gave a shit about what happened to the inferior kid. So I spent some time at the hospital by myself. Dabi pauses. He seems to realize how much he's been sharing and jolts. Anyways, whatever. I decided that there's no way to succeed the way I'd been going, so I went another way. Izuku sits there for a long moment, trying to understand all of Dabi's story. That was a hell of a reason to become a villain. Then he snorts. What? Dabi looks like he's thinking of pulling out the knife again. Okay, don't get me wrong. There is so much messed up about the way that your dad treated you, Izuku says. I mean, children aren't vessels to fulfill their parents' dreams. You shouldn't just choose one kid to pay attention to and ignore the others. But, like, that's all obvious, you know? Like, you know that the way you've been treated is just incredibly unfair and unjust. Dabi looks a little stricken. Izuku really hoped Dabi already knew that. Anyway, I just think that you've gone the wrong direction. Dabi's face shudders into a leer. What, villainy is wrong and I should switch to the light? Well, sure, if you want to do that I guess you can, but that's not what I mean. Dabi pauses and stares at Izuku. What I mean is that you dealt with your dad abandoning you. But you dealt with it by obsessing over it and letting it take over anything else that could have happened in your life? Izuku gestures vaguely. You've just let him stick his hooks into everything that you do. Because of him still being the focus of your life, you can't move onward. Dabi's head jerks back in the tiniest motion. That's not real revenge is what I'm saying. Izuku shrugs. Then looks away and takes another sip of his boba. Are you saying I should just kill him and be done with it? Dabi asks. He sounds more confused than anything. What? Oh no, please don't do that, Izuku says. He's not sure what's going to convince Dabi. Oh, killing is wrong? Dabi laughs again long and loud. And a little hysterical maybe. What is it that you mean then? He says once he's finally stopped. Izuku tries to remember what his point was. Oh well, I guess the best way to get revenge would be just to never let his legacy see the light of day. Shoto's already heading in that direction. He's going to be a hero but is doing it separately from your father. Being his own person instead of just your dad's son. Dabi seems thoughtful, then shakes his head. What does that even mean though? He asks, seeming frustrated. Well, you could do something really impressive all on your own. Like what? Take down that villain from the TV, Izuku wagers. Dabi freezes. Sensei? He asks hesitantly. Yeah, him. Izuku nods, kicking his feet as he gets into the idea. That'd be something that people would recognize and they wouldn't even be able to connect what you do to anything related to your dad. Dabi's looking at Izuku like he's crazy again. Is that what you're going to be doing? Dabi asks. Izuku shrugs. Yeah, I think so. I'm not so clear on the details yet, but that's the direction that things are going. Dabi stares off into the distance. He seems to be thinking through some things. So Izuku leaves him to it. At least a few minutes go by in silence. Izuku just watches people walk past and lets Dabi make up his mind. You know what? Dabi says into the silence. Let's do it. Let's take him down. I'm getting a little tired of putting up with Shigaraki anyways. He stands up from the table and stretches. Izuku smiles and gathers up his bag and their cups. Great, he chirps. I have no idea what's going to happen. Dabi looks at Izuku then laughs again. Crazy, right? Dabi says resignedly, but he seems a little more focused now. There's something a little more grounded in his eyes, like that edge of malice has been softened down the slightest bit. Izuku throws the trash away. Do you have a plan? At all? Dabi asks, trailing behind Izuku. Yeah, I do. I just don't know it yet. Dabi seems to take this as just the way that things are going to be now and nods. I'm sure that something will come up soon, Izuku offers in a conciliatory way. Dabi just nods. They part ways on the street. Izuku cheerful and Dabi thoughtful. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share and donate for more videos.